This 40-year-old elementary school student knocked on the door of a stranger's house. As soon as she entered the house, she said that she was the man's deceased wife. She then went to the man's daughter's room, took off her glasses, and claimed that she looked just like her when she was a child. She then ran downstairs and complained to her own portrait, asking why this particular photo had been chosen. The man and his daughter were puzzled by the girl's behavior. The girl told them that she was the man's wife who had died 10 years ago and had been reincarnated. She had suddenly remembered her past life today. Gina thought the child was mentally ill. Dion hurriedly asked the little girl her name. The girl said her name was Zoe and she was in the 4th grade of elementary school. Looking at the messy dining table and the takeout food, she asked what was going on with the meal. "How did you guys eat after I died? Even if you're busy, you should still put takeout food on a plate." Faced with Zoe's scolding, Dion and his daughter were both completely baffled. At 6 o'clock, the bell rang, and the girl hurriedly picked up her backpack and prepared to go home. Before leaving, Zoe reminded the uncle, "It's been 10 years since we last saw each other, and you're getting pretty old." After she left, Dion and his daughter were still in a daze. However, Dion noticed that the little girl's way of speaking and her habit of using a plate to serve food were exactly the same as his deceased wife's. The next day, Zoe ran to her husband's house and skillfully took the spare key from under the flower pot. She went to the cloakroom, found her secret stash, and took out the photo album. Zoe looked at the photos of her daughter growing up year after year and smiled happily, but there were no photos after her daughter turned 10. It seemed that the father and daughter did not have a happy life. Zoe called the old man and said she would meet him at their usual place to talk. Dion didn't think much of it, but on his way home, Zoe appeared at the station where he was supposed to meet his wife. Zoe pulled Dion to the supermarket. Dion asked her how she knew where he and his wife were meeting. Zoe said again that she was Dion's deceased wife. This attracted the attention of the people around them. They went to the Apple store, where Zoe bought the latest model. She skillfully downloaded the software and added Dion as a friend. Dion was deceived by Zoe. From then on, Zoe sent Dion a good morning message every day and encouraged him. Soon, she arrived at the restaurant where Gina frequently visited. She asked Gina in a motherly tone if she had a boyfriend. Gina angrily replied, "What does that have to do with you?" She didn't want to face this mother and hoped Zoe wouldn't bother her again. She then hurriedly left. Zoe then ran into Dion again at the coffee shop. She accused Dion of leaving work so early and having no ambition. After his wife passed away, Dion lost his drive and is now just an ordinary employee. Zoe felt heartbroken seeing Dion so downtrodden. She encouraged him to cheer up and not keep his head down. The next morning, Zoe went to his house early, but Dion said he had guests coming over and couldn't spare the time. Zoe asked him if he had prepared anything for his guests. The yard, which hadn't been cleaned in 10 years, was tidied up under Zoe's guidance. Dion saw Zoe standing on a stool skillfully preparing dinner and remembered the good times he had with his wife. Gina saw this scene and sadly rushed towards Zoe. She angrily told Zoe to get out, saying that this was her mother's space. Gina couldn't believe that the little girl in front of her was her own mother. In the evening, friends came over to attend the annual memorial service. Dion thanked his friends for mourning his wife over the past 10 years. He planned to sell the house and start a new life. However, Zoe overheard everything. After his friends left, Dion told Zoe that his wife had found the house. Although it was old, he had renovated it according to his wife's wishes. Even the tiles in the kitchen were carefully selected by his wife. Because his wife loved coffee, Dion had even learned how to brew it. He had written down everything from the amount of coffee to use to the temperature of the water. Dion handed Zoe a cup of coffee and asked her not to come to his house anymore. After all, 10 years had passed, and he and his daughter should start a new life. Zoe listened sadly and said, "Your coffee isn't as good as it used to be." Then she quietly left Dion's house. Zoe took out the money she had saved in her previous life and went to the countryside alone late at night. At that moment, it was pouring rain. She picked up an old umbrella from the ground and walked toward the distance. By the time it was just getting light, she arrived at a vegetable patch. Looking at the weeds over 2 meters tall, she recalled the scenes of planting vegetables with Dion in her previous life. Thinking of this, Zoe burst into tears, but she noticed a few intact fruits among the weeds. She picked one and held it carefully in her hands. By noon, Gina received a special gift. Gina looked at the familiar cake and recalled the birthday cake her mother had prepared for her when she was a child. which looked exactly the same. The cookies on top, shaped like numbers from 11 to 20, were filled with maternal love. She hadn't celebrated her birthday since her mother passed away. Gina believed her mother had truly returned. At the same time, the delivery man brought lunch to Dion. When Dion opened it, it was a dish invented by his late wife. He picked up a piece and put it in his mouth. The pungent spiciness hit him instantly, and this was the exact taste his wife had made. Back when his wife invented this dish, Dion was the first to taste its deliciousness. His wife had even given the dish a unique name. The familiar taste made Dion cry uncontrollably. He believed his wife had truly returned. The father and daughter ran towards Zoe's school at the same time. Zoe saw Dion coming to find her and knew that they believed her story. Dion asked her if she was really Amy. Zoe said, "You stood on the platform and proposed to me. Our wedding anniversary is March 20th. I was anxious and couldn't sleep all night with you." Dion said, "In the end, you said that as long as I was with you, every day would be a lucky day." Zoe said, "The gift you gave me was a tomato-shaped coaster." Dion confirmed that the girl in front of him was his wife who had passed away 10 years ago, though to outsiders, they looked more like younger and older relatives. Only they knew how it felt to be reunited as a family after 10 years of separation. Back home, Zoe started giving Dion orders like she used to. Dion, facing his wife's long-awaited scolding, was as happy as a child. He hoped his wife would keep scolding him forever. Zoe asked him if he was an idiot. Dion said that she was right to speak to him that way. Zoe told him to stop pushing her and not to take advantage of her. She had only become who she was now because of a miracle, so he had to prove to her that even if she was gone, they could still live a good life. Gina hoped that her mother would not blame her father because he had loved her so much for so many years and had never changed. Zoe took her daughter's hand and said that she was sorry for not being there for her on every birthday. Gina said that even if she became a primary school student, she would still be her mother. After a brief reunion, Dion had to take his wife back to their current home. Gina also started looking for a job. They stopped ordering takeout and started cooking themselves, though they were busy and disorganized. They enjoyed it. Zoe still prepared lunchboxes for them every day, always filling them to the brim. Dion said, "When you turn 18, let's get married." Zoe replied that she was still in elementary school. Dion's face lit up with the brightest smile he'd had in 10 years. He suddenly turned around, took out his cell phone, and took hundreds of photos of his wife. Dion made his wife's photos his cell phone wallpaper and would look at them from time to time and smile foolishly. Seeing him smile foolishly, his colleagues thought he had gone crazy. At noon, Zoe would send a message reminding Dion to eat. Dion would sweetly reply, "The lunch you made is indeed the best in the world." Every day after work, Dion would take the lunchbox back to his wife. When he saw his wife rushing over, he wanted to hide and scare her. Unexpectedly, Zoe's classmate ran up and said, "I like you." Dion was so shocked to hear the little boy confess his love to his wife that he fell flat on his face. He hurriedly got up, picked up the lunchbox from the ground, and staggered over. He immediately introduced himself as Zoe's uncle. He asked the little boy why he wasn't going home so late. As he was leaving, the little boy reminded Zoe not to rush to answer him. Dion thought back to the scene and felt a little jealous. Zoe quickly reminded him that the little boy was just an elementary school student. However, she was still a little excited when the little boy confessed his feelings. At that moment, Gina arrived. She had successfully found a job. Her parents were both happy for her. The family, which had been depressed for 10 years, was now harmonious and warm again. But Zoe was followed on her way home, so she quickened her pace and turned at the intersection. When the other person caught up, Zoe was nowhere to be seen. Zoe immediately stopped and claimed to be his sister. Roger looked at her in disbelief. Zoe told him that she was Amy's reincarnation and still had memories of her past life. But Roger still didn't believe her. He just wanted to tell Gina that he had seen Dion propose to this little girl a few days ago. Gina immediately asked her mother if this was true. After receiving Zoe's affirmative answer, she thought this was a good thing. Roger questioned Gina about what she was talking about. Although Zoe looked like an elementary school student, she was really the reincarnation of her mother. At that moment, Dion arrived and told Roger the same thing. Roger thought this family had gone mad. One called the girl mom, and the other called her wife. If you have too much money and nowhere to spend it, he could help you keep it. But don't let this little girl deceive you. Zoe immediately got angry and asked Roger what he had just said. Did you just ask me for money? She immediately scolded Roger. Dion said that this little girl was his wife, but Roger still refused to believe it. He even swore that he would expose Zoe's true nature. Dion said he understood Roger's feelings. Zoe sighed and said that Roger was still a child. Roger touched his red nose and remembered that when he had done something wrong in the past, his sister would pinch his nose in the same way. Although it hurt, he would never forget how much his sister loved him. He asked himself if Zoe was really his sister. When Zoe got home, her mother asked her why she made lunch every day. The school provided meals, so why did she bring lunch every day? Zoe cleverly defused the situation. Just then, Gina called, inviting her to a bowling social event with her best friends. But Gina didn't know how to refuse. Zoe encouraged her to go and make new friends, as she might meet her true love. If it weren't for your father coming to my restaurant that day, I would have missed this wonderful opportunity. The next morning, Zoe came to her daughter's house early to help her pick out beautiful clothes and even applied makeup for her. This was the first time Gina had ever worn makeup. After she was done, Dion took a photo of his daughter. Zoe reassured her daughter to go and have fun. Gina thanked her mother for everything she had done for her. Seeing how beautiful her daughter looked, she realized that a mother was indeed indispensable in a family. Dion looked at the portrait and blamed himself for not taking good care of his daughter all these years. He wasn't a good father. Zoe comforted him, saying that the past was the past. Whether now or in the future, he would always be Gina's father. Zoe voluntarily told her husband that she hadn't felt the joy of a date in a long time. Dion was overjoyed upon hearing this. They first went to the mall to buy a cute phone charm for their daughter. Then Zoe picked out a scarf for her husband. Dion hadn't bought clothes in years and was startled at the checkout. While taking a walk, they fed each other. On their way to the movies, they ran into Dion's colleague. The colleague asked Dion who the little girl with him was. Dion was at a loss for words. Zoe saw this and immediately kicked her husband. She then thanked the colleague for always caring about Dion. Zoe explained that she was Dion's relative. At the movie theater, Dion was holding a family-sized bucket of popcorn, ready to watch the movie with his wife. At that moment, an elderly couple walked by and remarked, "It's so nice to have a spouse to watch a movie with." Later, Dion looked at his reflection in the mirror and seemed a bit sad. Zoe also sighed, saying that they must look unusual to others, so we should try harder. Earlier, you said, actually, what were you going to say? Were you going to say that this girl is my wife? I know your personality, you never lie, but when we're out in public, you have to find a way to lie. You can't let others see through you. Dion said he just didn't want to lie. I understand what you mean because you once disappeared from my life. I don't want to waste a single moment of the time we have together on lies. Zoe said, "You're so silly, but this is the real you." Under her comfort, Dion smiled again. Later, the family gathered at the soccer field, but Zoe was in a low mood. Zoe comforted her, saying it was just a matter of not meeting the right person at the right time. Dion took out the gift he had prepared for his daughter. Gina saw it was a cow and was very surprised. Dion said, "Just follow your own pace. Mom and Dad will always be by your side." It was rare for his daughter to look so beautiful, so the family decided to take a family photo as a keepsake. On the way home, Zoe thought about her silly husband, who was always worried that someone would steal her away, but didn't know that he was also very good. Dion was very popular with women and often helped his neighbors with their work. He was obviously very popular, but he didn't know it. When they arrived at the front door, Roger was following behind them. When Zoe returned home, her mother angrily asked her where she had been. The photo album that hadn't been touched in 10 years finally had new photos added to it. Dion recalled when the family went to the aquarium to buy ice cream years ago and left his phone at the stall. When he found his wife and daughter, they had already missed the whale show. Fortunately, the whale put in an extra performance just for the three of them. Meanwhile, Zoe promised her mother she would stay home on Sunday, but she ended up going out to play with Dion all day, which made her mother very angry. Gina lied and said she was going to watch a classmate's soccer game to get out of it. Dion was still waiting for his wife to bring him lunch, but after waiting for a long time, she didn't show up, and none of his messages were replied to. This made Dion very worried. At work, he couldn't sit still and kept fiddling with his phone. His co-workers reminded him to get back to work, but he was distracted. At lunchtime, his coworker Kate saw that Dion didn't bring lunch, so she gave him some of hers. Dion took a bite and praised Kate's cooking. Just then, his phone rang. His wife had finally seen the messages he sent. Dion was so excited that he immediately thanked his coworkers. Zoe scolded Dion for sending so many messages. Dion quickly apologized, saying that he was very worried because he couldn't contact her. Zoe said that she also had a lot to do and not to send so many messages. Dion quickly apologized. The next day, Zoe brought her husband lunch as usual. Dion wanted to ask his wife to go out this weekend. Zoe said that if the place was boring, she wouldn't agree. When she saw that it was Sunday, she fell into deep thought. On one side was her husband and daughter from her previous life, and on the other side was her current mother. Zoe asked her mother about her plans for Sunday and found out that she was going to take her out. She looked at the photo of herself and her mother and didn't want to make her angry, so Zoe told Dion that she couldn't go on their date this Sunday. Dion was very understanding and even jokingly suggested that the two families go out together. Zoe angrily asked him what he was talking about. Dion said that she would have to meet her father and mother sooner or later. Zoe said that she didn't have a father. In any case, she couldn't go on the date that Sunday. The next day, Zoe woke up early, but her mother had made other plans at the last minute. Zoe felt disappointed and went to find her husband and daughter. When she saw them, she was very happy. The family went to see the beluga whale together, just like they used to, but Zoe wasn't sure if the whale was the same one from before, as it had been 10 years. Dion had specially bought 2 beluga whale plush toys for the mother and daughter. This time, he remembered to take his cell phone with him when he bought ice cream. Dion felt like he was in a dream. He hoped that this feeling would last forever. The family happily ate ice cream and enjoyed the sea view. At that moment, the phone rang. Dion had to go queue for the next amusement ride. Dion had done a lot of homework for this date and didn't want to miss the show like he did 10 years ago. Although the family had made a mess of things last time, they had a lot of fun. Gina talked about her parents getting married again. By the time her mother turned 18, her father would be almost 60. What a cute age difference. But Zoe looked troubled and got up to go to the bathroom. When Dion returned, he found that the mother and daughter were gone. Gina said her mother went to the bathroom, but she couldn't find her, so the father and son split up to search. Dion showed passersby a photo of his wife and asked if they had seen the little girl. When he found out that no one had seen her, he was very disappointed. He immediately stood there and shouted his wife's name. At that moment, Zoe suddenly appeared behind him. Dion said excitedly, "I thought I would never see you again." Zoe apologized and said that she had gotten lost on her way back from the restroom. Gina was also excited to see her mother and rushed forward. Dion wanted to greet his wife's mother, but she refused. Zoe also said some harsh words, explaining that this was the first time she had ever gotten angry. In the evening, Zoe politely bid farewell to her husband and daughter. However, as the father and daughter walked away, she quietly said, "I'm sorry." Zoe arrived at her husband's house late at night. Gina hurriedly came to greet her, seeming to have something urgent to discuss. They ran quickly together and turned off the lights. Then Dion and his daughter spoke in unison. "Happy birthday." Today was the birthday of Dion's wife in her previous life. Zoe thought they had all forgotten, but Dion said he would never forget this day. Zoe looked at the messy stove and the ugly homemade cake. Dion said he made it to look like a white whale, although it wasn't very pretty. He had bought a book to learn about the life cycle of white whales, to make sure that the white whale he saw at the aquarium 10 years ago was the same one. In the future, he would work even harder so that his wife wouldn't worry about him. No matter what happens in the future, he would not bear the burden alone because they were a family. Zoe stood there for a moment, her eyes moist. Then she made an excuse to go to the bathroom. Zoe sat in the corner and cried. It turned out that when she was cleaning the blackboard during the day, she realized that it was her birthday. But after school, no one came to see her, and she ran into Kate, the uncle's colleague. While chatting, Zoe discovered that Kate seemed to like Dion. Kate felt relaxed working with Dion. Since his wife passed away, Dion had been depressed for a long time. But recently, Dion had started to become more energetic, which made Kate think he was cute. Later, Zoe came to her brother Roger's house looking dejected. Roger thought she had been scolded by their mother again, but Zoe said she felt warm and happy when she was with Dion and Gina. She also asked Roger what kind of person his sister was. Roger thought she couldn't keep it up anymore and told her that his sister was a strong and reliable person who was like the sun in his heart, but his sister often messed up the people around her. Zoe hesitated. She didn't know if she should live according to her current identity or accept the memories of her past life that God had given her. But seeing Dion and Gina's determination to choose themselves gave her the motivation to persevere. Zoe asked, "If I feel lonely, can I come back here?" Gina stepped forward, held out her hand, and told her to eat some cake. Zoe ate the cake and looked at her husband and daughter with a look of satisfaction. Then the family happily took a family photo. Dion said that no matter what others thought, in his heart, they were a family. Zoe said that she would marry Dion again in 8 years to prove it. Then she added that if she met the right person before then, she would consider it. Hearing this, Dion couldn't help but feel a little down. When he drove his wife home that night, her mother saw them. Zoe's mother asked Dion who he was and why he was driving her daughter home so late at night. Dion realized that she was his wife's mother and was about to reveal his identity. Zoe quickly explained to her mother that she had lost her eraser. She had gone to the convenience store and happened to run into Dion, who gave her a ride home. Her mother simply thanked him and took her daughter home. After returning home, Gina felt that her mother was not easy to get along with. Dion said that he would also be worried if his daughter was brought home by a stranger. But he remembered what his wife had said last time. "I'll figure out a way to deal with my current family." Besides, he was older than his wife's mother. What parent would agree to this? Dion felt a little sad when he thought about this. The next day, Dion was still waiting for his wife to bring him lunch, but Zoe sent him a message saying that she couldn't come today because she had something to do. At noon, Kate brought a bag of food to Dion. She thought Zoe would tell her that she liked Dion and was a little shy. Dion learned from Kate that his wife's school was holding a ball game next week. He was a little excited that he would be able to talk to his wife's mother then. It would be even better if he could bring his wife a lunchbox, but he had lost confidence in his cooking after his last failed cake attempt. Dion suddenly remembered how delicious Kate's fried eggs were last time, so he immediately asked Kate how she made them last time. Zoe received the tickets for the game, and the teacher required a parent to accompany her. After school, her classmate Rosa called Zoe and asked if she wanted to participate in an art exhibition, so Zoe found her brother Roger. It turned out that she had agreed with her classmates long ago to collaborate on a comic book. Rosa had already finished her part, but she really had no talent for drawing. Roger couldn't help but laugh when he saw the cat Zoe drew. Zoe shyly said that she had tried many times but couldn't draw it. It turned out that Roger was a comic artist and had a natural talent for drawing since he was a child. When he first secretly published a serialized comic, he didn't tell his sister until the day it was released because he knew she would be happier than anyone else. However, after his sister passed away, Roger never picked up a pencil again. After returning home, Zoe wanted to tell her mother about next week's soccer game. Her mother just glanced at her and walked into the room to lie down on the bed. Zoe wanted her mother to accompany her to the game, but seeing how tired she was, she didn't say anything. Just as Zoe was getting ready for school, her mother suddenly asked her what she wanted for lunch. Zoe said she liked everything her mother made. Dion wanted to surprise his wife, so he asked Kate to teach him how to cook. Clumsy Dion failed 80 times before he finally managed to fry an egg. Although the eggs didn't look very good, they tasted very good. Kate envied Zoe for having an uncle like Dion. When she went to school to participate in competitions, her parents didn't have time to come. Dion said, "If you participate in the competition, I will do my best to support you." Hearing this, Kate was so moved that she almost fell in love on the spot. Dion and his daughter came to school full of hope. However, because they didn't have passes, they were almost arrested as criminals. Just then, Vito appeared and handed Dion 2 tickets. Dion asked, "What about your family?" Vito replied, "His father is an investor in this school." Dion remarked, "Vito's smile is that of a natural athlete." Zoe was looking around for her mother. Just then, Dion and his daughter rushed over. Zoe wondered why they were there. Dion said he didn't want to miss his wife's performance and wanted to take more beautiful photos of her. Zoe hurriedly pulled them aside and agreed not to greet her. Gina said she would complete the task. On the field, Zoe was focused on the game. Dion kept looking around for his wife and mother but was hit on the head by a basketball that went out of bounds. He picked up the basketball and threw it into the hoop. At that moment, the announcer said that the father over there had scored 3 points. The parents around them were cheering for their children and didn't notice Dion at all. Zoe felt that she had overthought it. At that moment, her mother was at home preparing lunch. She received a phone call and hurried out. It turned out that Tess was busy on a date with a man. After trying out all the equipment, she missed her daughter's lunchtime. The man suddenly said that he had to go far away for work. Tess said she was willing to go with him. The man was worried about Zoe's school arrangements, but Tess said she would figure something out when the time came. She had no attachment to her job. She hated the parents of her daughter's classmates even more. The two talked happily, completely forgetting that Zoe was still hungry. At this moment, Dion found his wife with the lunchbox, but Zoe knew that her husband and daughter hadn't eaten lunch, so she lied and said she had already eaten. Dion was a little discouraged after hearing this. Zoe was curious about what her husband had made. Dion immediately smiled, and the two sat down in the grass and secretly ate their lunch. Zoe, upon learning that Dion had gone out of his way to learn, praised his cooking skills. In the second half of the game, Zoe and Vito worked together perfectly and easily won the match. Gina was almost a fan of Vito. The other students asked Zoe if she was dating Vito. Dion was very unhappy to hear this. When they left, the other students' parents were all praising Zoe, which made Dion and his daughter very happy. But the next moment, they said that Zoe came from a very unfortunate family. Zoe's father had cheated on her mother and was abusive, and her mother had a bad temper. The neighbors often heard Tess scolding her daughter loudly. This made Dion very worried about his wife's situation, so the father and daughter waited for Vito to get out of school to learn more about Tess. They came and handed the comic to Rosa, but Rosa noticed that Zoe's drawing style was completely different from before. She immediately asked Zoe if she had forgotten about the past. Zoe immediately replied, "No." Rosa said, "You're not Zoe," and left. Vito's mother and Zoe's mother are good friends. They often heard Tess scolding her daughter and yelling at her. Zoe had been in much better spirits lately, so maybe her mother had changed. But today, Zoe didn't bring her lunch, which was unusual. Dion remembered that when he brought his wife lunch at noon, she said she had already eaten. What kind of family was Zoe in? What had she been through all these years? This made Dion and his daughter start to worry. But Tess was still dating a man, only to accidentally hear that he already had a family. He said he had to go out of town for work, but he was actually trying to get rid of her. After returning home, Dion was restless, not knowing how his wife was doing. She hadn't read any of the messages he sent her, so he called his wife, but no one answered. Dion looked at the marriage vows he and his wife had written. He thought back to his kind wife saying, "I'll figure something out for our family." Dion couldn't control himself anymore and rushed out with his clothes. At that moment, it was raining heavily outside. Zoe was at home sorting through her clothes and looking at photos of herself and her mother, but she had never enjoyed her mother's love. At that moment, Dion called. He had heard too many bad things about Tess during the day. He was worried that his wife was on her way and wanted to talk to Tess face to face. Zoe claimed that she didn't know anything and didn't want to know. She thought her mother did it to protect her. Zoe told her husband not to just lecture her. When Tess returned, she immediately asked her daughter who she was talking to. In a fit of rage, she scolded her daughter harshly. Dion heard the unusual sounds on the phone and rushed over immediately. Tess tried to grab her daughter's phone but was stopped by her daughter. As the mother and daughter struggled, Dion also rushed over. Dion immediately confronted her, asking what she was doing. Tess asked him in confusion why he was in her house. Dion angrily told her that she was not fit to be a mother. If she didn't take good care of Zoe, he would take her away. Seeing his wife's pleading eyes, Dion slowly calmed down. Zoe hoped that he wouldn't cause any more trouble. Tess thought that Dion had bought the cell phone for his daughter so that she could secretly contact him. Zoe explained that she had saved up her own money to buy it, but her mother didn't believe her. The uncle also tried his best to explain to his wife, but Tess told him to shut up. Tess asked Zoe if she hated this family. Zoe immediately replied that it wasn't like that, but Tess didn't want to listen to explanations and pushed her daughter out the door. Zoe, who was kicked out, had no choice but to follow Dion back home. Zoe blamed Dion for barging into someone else's house without permission and getting angry at her mother. Dion was about to get up to explain, but his wife stopped him. Fortunately, Gina spoke up for her father. Otherwise, Dion wouldn't know when to stop kneeling. After taking a shower, Zoe put on her daughter's clothes. She even played games with her daughter, though she was no longer her match. Dion watched the mother and daughter play happily and regained his childhood innocence. The family played games together happily, and the house seemed to have returned to 10 years ago. Everyone's faces were filled with uncontrollable smiles. To cherish this rare time together, the family spread out blankets on the living room floor, but they were too excited to sleep. Late at night, Zoe looked at her sleeping daughter, who looked exactly the same as she did 10 years ago. She turned to her husband and whispered, "Are you asleep?" Dion playfully replied, "I'm sleeping." Zoe gently tapped her husband's forehead. Dion was too excited to sleep. Zoe hoped he would forgive her for losing her temper today. Dion also realized that he hadn't controlled his emotions well. Just like that, he kept staring foolishly at his sleeping wife. The next day, he got up early and made lunch for his daughter and himself, just like he had done 10 years ago. After a simple breakfast, Zoe was worried that her mother would come back to check on them, but Dion was afraid that his wife wouldn't be able to face her mother if she went back. He suggested that they lie to get through it. Dion watched his wife leave, filled with worry. When Zoe returned home, she saw her mother sleeping on the table and sensibly covered her with a blanket. She kept apologizing to her mother for what happened yesterday. Zoe stood alone on the road looking at the photo of herself and her mother. At that moment, Dion came home from work to return the lunchbox. Zoe told Dion that she wanted to tell her mother the truth. She didn't want to deceive her with lies anymore and hoped to face it together with Dion. Dion gave his wife his full support. After work, Zoe took her mother to meet Dion. Dion told Tess that Zoe was the reincarnation of his wife who had passed away 10 years ago. He also took out a photo of his wife from back then. Now he had all of his wife's memories. Tess thought Dion had gone mad and was talking nonsense. Dion mentioned the lunchbox again. Tess recalled the scenes of her daughter making lunchboxes every day. She thought her daughter was just doing it for schoolwork. Tess found the situation absurd and angrily turned to leave. Dion tried to explain further but was pulled away by his wife. Back home, Zoe tried to continue explaining to her mother, but her mother didn't want to hear a single word. She had been dealing with unpleasant things every day for her daughter. Now she had to deal with this absurd situation as well. Zoe, acting out of character, turned off the TV. At that moment, she began to talk to her mother as Amy. Tess didn't care about her daughter at all. When she was in a bad mood, she took it out on her child. Since the divorce, she hadn't felt the warmth of home. She could hardly remember a single happy moment with Zoe. Her former father and her current classmates all seemed like virtual beings. She couldn't even remember feeling happy when she and her mother took their big head photos together. Tess was confused and didn't know what was wrong with her daughter. Zoe said sorry to her mother. Then she told her mother not to cry alone anymore. "Because I'm on your side, that's all I want to say. I'm leaving." Tess watched her daughter leave and couldn't calm down for a long time. Looking at the cake her daughter made for her, she remembered how happy her daughter used to be every day. Even when her test results weren't good, she would find ways to make her mother happy. Even a simple gesture would make her daughter excited for a long time. It turned out that her daughter's unhappiness was all because of herself. Ever since her husband abandoned her and their child, her mother had been drinking every day and blaming her daughter for everything. "If it weren't for you, how could I have married a man like that? Because of you, my life is a mess." Zoe was very sad to hear her mother's words, but she held back her tears and stayed by her mother's side. Tess picked up a spoon and took a bite of the cake her daughter had made. She believed that this taste was not something her daughter could have made, so she hurried to her daughter's school to find her and ask her what was going on. Tess looked everywhere for her daughter. Zoe was delivering lunch to Dion. At that moment, Tess found her. She couldn't believe that the daughter she had raised for 10 years was Dion's reincarnated wife. But her daughter couldn't have made such a delicious cake. She didn't know when it had happened, but the daughter who had been afraid to look her in the eye was now a stranger. Tess wasn't sure who her daughter really was. Zoe said she was the reincarnation of Dion's deceased wife. This made Tess feel like she was falling apart. Where was her own daughter? They didn't know how to answer. Zoe didn't know why she had become like this. Tess grabbed Dion and demanded that he find her daughter. But Dion didn't know how to restore Zoe's memory, but he believed that there would be a way in the future. Perhaps after the two families became one, Zoe would receive enough love and a miracle might happen. Zoe and his wife were now the same person. Everyone would work together toward happiness. Dion immediately called out, "Tess, Mom!" Tess was moved by the man in front of her, who was taller than her, and did not argue. Perhaps only by doing as he said could she get her daughter back. Roger ran into the writer Yara on the street. Yara was desperately writing a novel about reincarnation. She told Roger about his personal experiences. Just as she finished writing the last punctuation mark, she fainted on the table. Roger called an ambulance in time and sent her to the hospital. At this moment, a man was standing outside the window watching them. Although Tess still lived under the same roof as her daughter, their relationship seemed a little strange, since she accepted her daughter. Her temper had calmed down a lot. Dion, in an effort to improve his relationship with his mother-in-law, brought freshly baked bread and fresh fruits in the morning. He kept calling her mom one word at a time. This made Tess feel very uncomfortable. Just as Dion was about to exchange contact information with his mother-in-law, Tess nearly lost her temper. Tess said, "Don't keep calling me Mom." Dion could only keep saying "I'm sorry." Zoe scolded her husband, blaming him for always speaking without considering the situation. Dion said he just wanted to improve their relationship quickly. Zoe said that she felt like a stranger to her mother now and felt very sorry for her. She had taken Tess's daughter's body but didn't have any memories of her. Dion comforted his wife, saying that maybe it was just a sudden reincarnation that was taking up too much memory in her brain and that she would slowly regain her memories. In order to quickly regain her memories, Zoe asked Vito what she was like before. Vito told her that the old Zoe was very shy and rarely responded when he spoke to her. Although he couldn't change that, he liked Zoe very much. In the restaurant, Zoe overheard her daughter say that she already had someone she liked. Zoe saw her boss and hurriedly signaled him not to say anything. The boss understood and Dion also arrived at that moment. Zoe hurriedly pulled her husband away from the restaurant. She told her husband that their daughter had started dating. Dion was very surprised and, as a father, felt very complicated. Zoe comforted him, saying that their daughter had grown up and was no longer a 10-year-old child. Dion mentioned that he had given Kate his wife's recipes for a company event. Zoe got angry and asked Dion if he had ever thought about remarrying in the 10 years since she had died. Dion said he had never thought about it. When she got home, Zoe ran into her mother, who was about to leave. But this time, her mother wasn't angry and had even prepared dinner for her. Dion's company held a new product tasting event, and Kate was in charge of the event. To facilitate future promotions, they invited some famous influencers. They thought the event was a success, but the next day, the product photos were posted online, which made the company leaders very angry. Dion wanted to encourage Kate not to be discouraged. However, Kate was so upset that she made the boss withdraw into himself. Zoe found out and gave Dion a task. He had to get along with his mother-in-law, cheer Kate up, make his depressed boss happy, and keep an eye on his daughter's love life. Dion felt like his brain wasn't enough to handle all this. He didn't know when he would be able to get everything done. Zoe thought they should have a barbecue to bring everyone together and have some fun. Dion agreed. "Then I'll leave it to you. Don't rely on me, a school kid." The next day, Dion set up the barbecue grill in the wilderness. Zoe arrived first with her mother. Her younger brother Roger soon arrived as well. The two families happily grilled meat, strengthening their bonds. Gina arrived with her boyfriend. The young man was handsome and sunny, seeming like a good kid. Dion, seeing his daughter so happy, couldn't help but smile with relief. Everyone was excitedly grilling and eating, but Tess looked a bit unhappy. Zoe noticed her mother's feelings and handed her a piece of roasted marshmallow. Dion also brought over a steaming cup of coffee. Zoe thought that dipping the marshmallow in the coffee would taste good. After taking a sip, Tess felt the sweetness in her mouth and the warmth in her heart. She felt out of place there, so after saying goodbye, she left first. Zoe said she would buy some things and take her mother to the station. When Kate arrived, she immediately greeted Dion. On the way home, Tess said that she had a very happy day. She envied her daughter for having such a family. Zoe knew that her mother was now looking at her with disappointment. She blamed herself for letting her see a stranger instead of her daughter. Tess also regretted saying those things to her daughter. If she had considered her daughter's feelings earlier, she wouldn't have lost her now. Tess was full of regret and said that she was the worst mother. Zoe rushed over and took her mother's hand. The two walked home like a real mother and daughter. At the same time, Dion was still doing the task his wife had given him to make everyone happy. After the party, his good friend didn't forget to give Kate a helping hand. On the way, Dion gave Kate a lollipop. He had learned how to make it from his wife, but he almost let it slip. Kate was very moved. She knew that Dion had used his privilege to keep her job. She thought that Dion had organized the party to make her happy. With the gift, she mistakenly thought that Dion had feelings for her, so she bravely confessed her feelings to Dion. Kate gave Dion a kiss and then shyly ran away. But Zoe, who had rushed back, saw everything. When Dion saw his wife, he was so scared that he backed away. Zoe angrily said, "You should be happy that a young woman kissed you." Dion hurriedly explained that he would never cheat on her. Zoe didn't want to hear his explanation and stormed off. The next day, Dion sent his wife messages but didn't receive any replies, leaving him unsure of what to do. Looking at the large steamed bun in front of him, he even considered becoming a monk. At that moment, Gina came into the restaurant looking gloomy, followed by Roger. They were so happy yesterday, but today they were withdrawn. At this moment, Roger said he hoped Dion and Gina would go back to his hometown with him. His mother was seriously ill and no one was taking care of her. Dion thought this was a good opportunity to prove himself, so he told his wife about it. But Zoe didn't know how to face his mother. Although she missed her very much, she refused Dion's request. Dion told his wife she should go see his mother. Tess saw Zoe's dilemma. After Dion left, Tess sat down with her and talked about her own mother. Although her mother had not been good to her, now she had no chance to be filial. She advised Zoe to go back to her hometown and see her mother so she wouldn't have any regrets. The next day, they returned to their hometown in the countryside. Gina said she didn't remember her grandmother very well, having only seen her once when she was 5 years old. Zoe was incredulous and asked her if her mother hadn't come to her funeral. It turned out that on the day of Zoe's funeral, Roger had picked up his mother at the station. But on the way, his mother had used the excuse of forgetting something to turn back and didn't send his daughter off on her final journey. Zoe was deeply saddened by this. At that moment, her cousin Uma came to greet them. Zoe immediately walked up and asked Uma's daughter to call her aunt. Uma looked puzzled upon hearing this. Fortunately, Dion quickly came to his wife's rescue. When Zoe returned home, she looked at her mother, who was suffering from Alzheimer's, and felt very sad. Her mother did not recognize the girl in front of her. Zoe also had no way of telling her who she was. Dion hurried out to comfort his wife, but Zoe felt that she had already passed away, so being able to see her mother again was already a blessing. However, the family had a dispute over who would take care of the elderly woman in the future. Roger, who had Alzheimer's and had never received his mother's love since childhood, did not want to come back to take care of her. He wanted to stay in Tokyo and continue his career as a manga artist. His relatives mercilessly said that he was a liar and a good-for-nothing. Roger was very angry when he heard this. Dion hurriedly came over to persuade him, but Roger pushed him away. He kept saying not to blame Roger, but Roger was not grateful at all. Dion told Roger that if there was anything, he could discuss it with him because they were family. Roger said, "If I asked you for advice, what would you do for me? Since my sister died, our relationship has been nothing but a shell. What's the point of talking to you?" Gina asked her uncle not to blame her father. "Didn't you ask me to come back with you? You can't do it yourself, and you're afraid of what people will say, so you're using us as a shield. There's no one in the world on my side." Zoe watched Roger leave and felt terrible. She found Roger in the place where they used to play as children. Roger knew it was all his fault. From being a comic book artist to a failure, all his friends had left him. He couldn't even pay his rent and spent his days drinking. If his sister were alive, no matter how bad he was, she would always comfort and encourage him. But now he had become a worthless person and didn't know what was the point of living. Zoe said, "You're better off than I am." Those words finally woke Roger up. He had taken care of his sister since childhood and couldn't accept the fact that she was gone. When he got home, Roger took the initiative to admit his mistakes. He hoped his family would give him a year to plan his future and that he would work hard. After dinner, Zoe and Dion enjoyed the scenery and reminisced about their childhood. Bringing up Kate again, Dion thought he had made a mistake and wanted his wife to punish him. Zoe just patted Dion's forehead lightly. At night, Gina thought that her boyfriend didn't love her and wanted to end the relationship. Zoe encouraged her to try hard and not miss out on the person she loved. She was like a lamp lighting up everyone around her, but this lamp was about to go out. The family packed their bags and prepared to return to the city. Zoe was very grateful to her sister-in-law for taking care of her mother in her place. She came to her mother again and again to say sorry. When it was time to part, her friend offered to stay and take care of her mother. Gina also mustered up the courage to confess her feelings to her boyfriend. Dion found Kate and rejected her love. All his life, he had only had eyes for his wife and could not accept anyone else. On New Year's Eve, the two families went to the temple to pray for blessings. Zoe and Dion both wish for a happy life in the future. Only Tess is at a loss. At that moment, the restaurant owner approaches and asks them what their wishes are. Dion says he just wants to be happy with his family forever. The owner replies that they should cherish their current life. His words leave everyone a bit confused. They head to the restaurant, happily holding hands, ready to welcome the new year. Just then, Zoe suddenly loses consciousness and collapses to the ground. When she woke up, she only recognized her mother. She seemed very unfamiliar with Dion and Gina. Gina tried to touch Zoe's body, and she was so scared that she quickly pulled back and turned to look at her mother, seemingly at a loss. So she turned and ran out. She didn't run far before she fainted in the restaurant owner's arms. The owner told everyone not to worry, that Zoe was just tired and needed to get some sleep. Dion then carried Zoe to a chair. At that moment, the restaurant owner saw Amy herself in the mirror. Amy looked at Dion and his daughter with an apologetic and reluctant expression. The next day, Zoe woke up at Dion's house. As soon as she got up, she bumped into Dion and saw stars. She didn't respond to Tess and Gina's greetings and got up to cook. Dion immediately asked his wife if she recognized him. Zoe asked him if he had hit his head. She made a hearty breakfast as usual. During the meal, she gave her daughter a big red envelope, because it had been so long since the family had spent Chinese New Year together. On the way home, Tess was convinced that Zoe must have been her daughter when she woke up, but Zoe didn't say anything and just accompanied her mother home in silence. Gina felt that her mother had changed a little after fainting. Roger suddenly remembered that Yara didn't recognize him when she woke up after fainting in the cafe. The novel she wrote was also very similar to her sister's situation, so Dion bought the novel to find the answer. She also learned from Kate when the final chapter of the novel would be published. Dion told his wife the plot of the novel, which was exactly the same as what happened to her. He wanted to find an opportunity to ask the author for advice. They thought it was just a novel, but agreed with Dion's idea. On the weekend, the family went to the release event and waited in line together, eating cola cakes, a flavor they hadn't tasted in 10 years. Everyone was happy, but when they finally got to the front of the line, there were only 2 tickets left. The 4 decided that the uncle and Roger would go to the event. Dion handed the novel to Yara for her signature. Just as he was about to hand her the letter he had written, he was escorted out by staff. Zoe and her daughter felt sorry for Dion. Roger believed that since he knew Yara, he would definitely complete the task. He walked up to her, but before he could introduce himself, he was kicked out by the staff. Both of them failed their missions, but they were still in the mood to encourage each other. Zoe blamed them for being unreliable men. At that moment, Gina saw the words Underground Cafe in the book. Yara arrived at the Underground Cafe as promised and apologized to everyone first. She explained that her mother couldn't say much at the book launch. Roger asked Yara if she still remembered him. After getting an affirmative answer, he told Yara that he also had a reincarnated person in his life. That person was the elementary school student standing in front of him. Although Zoe was an elementary school student, she was his sister. Yara said that her real name was Carl and that she had been a junior high school teacher when she was alive. Her biggest dream was to become a novelist. Although her submissions were never selected, she never gave up on her dream. However, Carl's life ended in an accident 5 years ago. Dion thought that if it was reincarnation, it wouldn't match her current age. Yara explained that she was just saying that for the sake of the novel. She then asked Zoe if she remembered the person who entered her body. At first, she didn't know, But when she remembered, her attachment to this world made Carl believe that he was still alive. Yara, who used to be on the basketball team, was seriously injured in a game and couldn't go to the high school she wanted to attend. So she became desperate about her life. Carl had come to comfort her but accidentally took over Yara's body. Once the body's original owner returns, the soul will lose all memories. Upon learning the truth, the entire family fell into despair. Zoe remained optimistic, comforting everyone before leaving under the pretext that it was too late to stay. On her way home, she couldn't stop thinking about what Yara had said. A chill ran down her spine, and she sat huddled in the corner. Perhaps at that moment, she was truly afraid of losing everything she had. Dion looked at the marriage certificate he and his wife had written together and stayed up all night. The next day, Dion waited anxiously for his wife in the restaurant. The boss saw what was on Dion's mind and called him to the family shrine. He told Dion that he had seen his real wife, although reality was always cruel. The boss still told Dion that Zoe would leave one day. He hoped that Dion would understand the meaning of Zoe's return. At that moment, Zoe arrived at the restaurant, thinking Dion was late. The man told her that Dion was talking with the boss. Zoe didn't think much of it and sat down. Kate also arrived at the restaurant, feeling awkward upon seeing Zoe, and tried to find an excuse to leave. Zoe asked Kate if she had started dating Dion. Kate replied that she had been rejected by Dion. Dion said he only loved his wife and would never date or marry anyone else. After hearing Kate's true feelings, Zoe knew that she would have to leave sooner or later. Only with her would Dion start a new life. When Dion returned, the waiter gave him the note Zoe had left. "I have something to tell you at home tonight." Zoe called everyone together and announced that she had remembered taking Amy's body. After her death, she often returned home and saw her father and daughter living in a daze. She desperately wanted to tell them to pull themselves together but couldn't find a way to do so. Dion's increasingly frail appearance worried Zoe deeply, but she felt powerless to help. Amy saw Zoe crying in the park wearing only her pajamas. Out of maternal instinct, Amy tried to comfort her but accidentally entered her body. Zoe explained that she had to return this body to its original owner. She told her daughter to take care of herself if she was gone. Gina said that without her mother, life had no meaning. She begged her mother not to disappear again. Zoe was very reluctant, but she couldn't keep occupying someone else's body. That would be too cruel to the other mother. Zoe comforted her husband and told him to live well even if she was gone. Dion hurriedly hugged his wife and said no. This time, Amy really left. When she woke up, the real Zoe was back. The unfamiliar environment made her a little panicked. She nervously threw herself into her mother's arms. Amy left Zoe's body, facing her departure again. Her family was unwilling to accept this fact. When Zoe returned home, she thought she had had a dream. She even told her mother about what she had seen. She met a woman in the park, but when she woke up, it was already daylight. She hurried to school, but her child didn't seem to see her. She wanted to go home, but then she saw a girl who looked exactly like her. The girl was cheerful, lively, and very smart, and was very popular with her classmates. She was exactly the type of girl her mother liked. She, on the other hand, was the type of person her mother hated. During the time she lost her daughter, Tess realized her mistakes. Dion's life returned to the way it was before, and he became listless. Gina also became completely dejected. Dion went to the place where his wife used to bring him breakfast, but she never came. He couldn't muster any enthusiasm for work either. Despite Amy's encouragement, he couldn't feel it. Gina saw the message her boyfriend sent and chose not to reply. Amy looked at her sad daughter and wanted to comfort her, but she couldn't touch her face. She could only blame herself and say, "I'm sorry." Amy waited for her husband at the restaurant every day, seeing her lover growing more and more haggard. She wished she could be a little girl again and be by her husband's side. While Dion and Kate were working in the neighborhood, they saw Zoe and her mother. He just couldn't go up and say hello like he used to. In the evening, Gina's boyfriend came to visit. He was very worried because he hadn't heard from Gina for many days, but Gina couldn't tell him the truth and just wanted to be alone for a while. Gina said that she wished she and her mother had disappeared together 10 years ago. Hearing his daughter say this, Dion's heart broke. Thinking back on the little things his wife had done for him and how she had encouraged him, Dion felt that he had to pull himself together and live up to his wife. The next day, Dion prepared breakfast for Gina himself. He picked up his scarf and was about to go to work, but then he remembered his wife and put the scarf back on the chair. He reminded his daughter to eat and hurried to work. Roger came to the restaurant with a bag and started drawing comics again. To make up for the regret of 10 years ago, he drew a comic book especially for his sister. The boss noticed Amy's thoughts and asked Roger if he could take a look. Although he didn't really understand the comic, he looked at it carefully and slowly, just to give Amy some time. At this moment, Carl also arrived at the restaurant. Seeing Roger pick up his pencils again, he was happy for him. Carl had no more attachments in this world and was ready to move on. Roger turned his head abruptly, as if he sensed the presence of his sister and Carl. Amy felt that it was time for her to leave. Although she was very reluctant, she had to part ways in the end. When Dion returned home in the evening, he was anxious to see the untouched food on the table. He ran out of the house, rode his bike to the supermarket, and bought a bunch of ingredients according to the recipe. After returning home, he followed the recipe on his phone and made a sumptuous dinner. Then he came to his daughter's room. Dion knew that he had not taken good care of his daughter in the 10 years since his wife left. His negative emotions had also affected his daughter, but the time he spent with his wife again made him realize that life must go on. He would strive to face life head-on to honor his mother's wishes. No matter how long it took, he would prove himself to his wife. Gina cried as she asked her father what he had prepared for dinner. They then sat down at the table to eat. Gina felt that her father's cooking wasn't as good as her mother's. Recalling the happy moments she had shared with her mother, she couldn't help but shed tears. Zoe was intently drawing a comic when her mother returned home from work. Tess was curious about what her daughter was drawing. Zoe said she was drawing a woman she met in the park. Vito and Rosa said that they were a little different now. Zoe wanted to know where the child who looked exactly like her was. Tess told her daughter that this person was very gentle and always thought about the happiness of others. Her smile was as warm as the sun, and everyone liked to be around her. Tess said that even though she was her mother, she was very kind to her. She was so good to me, but she couldn't give you anything. Zoe put down her paintbrush and silently looked at the woman in the painting. In the evening, Tess came to cover Zoe with a blanket. Zoe, dressed in her pajamas, sat beside the bed. She watched her mother leave the room and slowly left the house herself. At this moment, Amy was waiting for someone to pick her up. She said goodbye to her daughter one last time. However, she waited for a long time, but no one came to take her away. Since it was her first time dying, she had no experience and didn't know when someone would come, so she could only wait there helplessly. At that moment, Amy saw Zoe again. Zoe confronted her, asking if she really could leave like this. Amy once again used Zoe's body to try to say goodbye to her family. She promised Tess that she would return Zoe afterward. Then Zoe came to Dion's house again. Just like the first time, the father and daughter were a bit at a loss. It wasn't until Zoe asked them what day it was that they realized Amy had returned. The family hugged each other tightly. This was their last day together. Dion was still clumsy at cooking, which made his wife both heartbroken and amused. After a simple breakfast, the family went to the mall to shop. Looking at her graceful daughter, who was like a walking clothes rack, everything she wore looked good on her, so she bought several outfits in no time. Dion sighed and lamented that women were really good at shopping. Amy then picked out a necklace for her daughter. When he saw the price, Dion was shocked, but Amy told him that a good necklace could be worn for many years and was actually a good deal. Realizing this, Dion didn't hesitate to buy it. Amy knew that her daughter hadn't contacted her boyfriend in many days because she had left. She then took her daughter to find her boyfriend and gave them some time alone. When Dion arrived, he was out of breath. When the boyfriend learned that Gina still loved him, his heart finally settled down and he smiled happily. Then the family went to a restaurant, where the boyfriend asked the parents to let him marry their daughter. Amy looked at her daughter who had found happiness and her eyes filled with tears. She asked him to take good care of her daughter. While shopping at the supermarket, Amy asked Dion to think carefully about his relationship with Kate, but Dion only wanted his wife by his side at that moment. Amy asked her husband not to always think about the past and to make plans for his future. Looking at his wife who was always worried about him, Dion remembered the time he had spent with her. After regaining his composure, Dion seemed to think of something. He told his daughter to take good care of her mother and then hurriedly left. Amy learned that Roger's comic was about to be published, so she went to Roger's workplace. Seeing her brother working hard, she was very worried, but she didn't want to disturb him. Roger looked up and saw the girl. He didn't know if she was his sister, so he hurriedly ran after her. He introduced himself to the girl and told her that his comic would be published in the next issue of the magazine. She praised Roger and said she would definitely read the comic when it came out, then turned and left. Amy was very happy to know that everything was going well for her brother. Dion called Kate, hoping she could help him. His wife had returned, but they only had one day. When Amy and her daughter returned, they blamed Dion for leaving them behind. But when they saw Dion had turned the house into a restaurant, his wife was at a loss. Amy's dream was to open her own restaurant. She wanted to use vegetables she grew herself to make dishes for her customers to enjoy. Amy looked at everything her husband had prepared for her and her eyes filled with tears again. For the opening of the small restaurant, Dion invited all his friends to his home and handed his wife a chef's uniform. Kate brought Dion some fresh ingredients, but because she was in such a hurry, this was all she could prepare. Dion was very grateful for Kate's help. More and more guests arrived at the house, and Amy worked hard to cook. As each dish was served, Amy looked at the happy faces of everyone and smiled, but her eyes were filled with sadness. If only time could freeze at this moment. After the meal, everyone took a photo together. At the end, Amy called Kate over and asked her to take care of Dion in the future. After seeing all the guests off, Amy suddenly remembered that she had one regret. The farm where she used to grow vegetables with her family was now overgrown with weeds. She asked Dion to take care of it and plant new seeds there. The family returned to the farm, and Amy recalled her past with Dion. With Dion by her side, she was always happy. Dion knew that his time with his wife was coming to an end, and he seemed a little sad. Amy comforted him, telling him to always stay positive. In the future, someone else would take her place. Even when she was gone, he should live a good life. Amy called her daughter over and comforted her, saying that she had done a lot for her. From the moment she was born, she had brought her happiness, and that happiness had continued until now. Gina also promised that she would not be depressed anymore because she didn't want her mother to be sad. When dawn broke, the family took their tools to the vegetable garden and planted a chili seed together. Amy watered the seed, hoping that it would grow healthily. Then she collapsed weakly into Dion's arms. Gina looked at her mother with reluctance and said, "Thank you for coming back to see me." Dion also thanked his wife for bringing him happiness after she returned. When the sun rose, Zoe woke up. This time, she didn't seem panicked. She knew this was the family Amy wanted to see the most. Zoe returned home, and her mother also showed a smile she hadn't seen in a long time. Tess had made her daughter an omelette rice dish. Dion returned home and noticed that his wife's portrait had changed. It turned out that Amy had secretly replaced it with a photo she liked. Life returned to normal, but this time Dion and his daughter were no longer depressed. Instead, they faced life positively. Although Amy had left them again in this way, these days had given them the courage to face life again. Dion was no longer as unmotivated as before. Roger's comic was officially published in a magazine. Gina also found happiness for herself. The story ended perfectly.